Welcome, everybody. Welcome, fellow patriots. Welcome, fellow deplorables. Welcome, fellow dregs to society. Welcome, all you rock dwellers. Welcome, all of you who are in Facebook jail or suspended by Twitter. Welcome to the Conservative Commandos radio show, literally and figuratively. I'm Rick Trader, coming to you from the studios of the Conservative Commandos radio network. And joining me today as my co-host is the patriot from the battle-born state, the Silver State of Nevada, that's Sharron Engel. For rebroadcast, please check out our website. Even though you can't see it on Facebook, check out our website, ccrshow.com, ccrshow.com. And you can find our radio show there, our TV show there, a lot of terrific information and a lot of great articles. And with that, Sharron, please make the next introduction of our longtime friend.
Well, it is a pleasure to introduce Frank Venuccio, who serves as editor-in-chief of the New York Analysis of Policy and Government, providing objective coverage for key issues facing the United States today. Frank is the co-host of the Venuccio Novak Report. Nationally, both are broadcast on radio and web at Connecticut at amfm247.com. Frank also co-hosts the American Political Zone, broadcast on cable in eastern Connecticut. In the aftermath of the 9/11 attack, Frank Venuccio was appointed by New York's Governor George Pataki to lead the hard-hit New York County Workers' Compensation Board. Frank, welcome back to the Conservative Commandos radio show.
Sharron, Rick, it's great to be with you again.
Well, we found an article, Efficiency and Transparency, How Mulvaney Reformed the CFPB. Explain first the CFPB, and then we'll talk about the reforms.
I wish I could easily explain the CPFB. It's the Consumer Protection Financial Board. It's a sort of weird organization originally set up during the Obama administration. And if you recall, there was a lot of objection that this was sort of an organization out of control. It was taken away from the control of Congress. It is an example of the trend, Rick and Sharron, that we all face in this country, that so many of the decisions that affect our daily lives are not ruled by our elected officials or by the courts, but by unelected, faceless bureaucrats who appear to be accountable to nobody. Now, when we look at how the CPFB was set up, it was set up specifically to make sure that it was unaccountable. And there was a weird situation that occurred, you recall, after the Obama administration was over and the president of this, the head of the CPFB resigned. The new president, President Trump, did what presidents are supposed to be able to do, appoint the new chief. Yet the person who was second in command insisted that she, rather than the president of the United States, had the ability to decide who was going to be in control. And I see Rick, and he's shaking his head, and he's absolutely right. I mean, this was a ludicrous argument. It had no constitutional basis, no legal basis, but it's good to remember the incident because, we talk a lot about the deep state. You cannot find a better example of the deep state in action than what the CPFB personnel attempted to do.
Wow. That's a mouthful. But, in reading your article, you say there are 1,300 separate federal organizations that are part of this.
Sharron, I deal a lot with small business organizations. I try to help them out a bit in various bureaucratic issues. And I got to tell you, the most well-meaning, the most law-abiding, scrupulous small business people are having a hard time complying with regulations they might not know how to exist. Now, the folks in Washington might not believe this, but a small business person doesn't spend the first 4 hours of his workday reading the Federal Register to determine what regulation he might run afoul of. It's been said that if you live in a large city, if you run a small business any place in the country, you can't get up, brush your teeth, and cross the street without breaking some federal regulation that you didn't even know existed.
Well, and it's interesting to note that Senator Elizabeth Warren has proclaimed this her brainchild.
Well, you can't question Native American wisdom. So I guess this is something that her chief or Sakchum at some point told her all about. Look, if it's her brainchild, then she should be royally embarrassed. There's a point at which you have to say, what does government by the people, for the people, and of the people really mean? And if, as the left wants us to believe, that it's government by unelected, unappointed, unaccountable bureaucrats, well, that's not government. And I don't want to be excessive here, but that's tyranny.
Well, you're right. Now, if President Trump wanted to, couldn't he executive order this CFPB out of existence?
I believe there's some legislative background that would make it difficult for him to do so, which is a problem in and of itself. One of the tacks the left has taken after the election of 2016, which they lost, has been to try to continue with the policies of the left by usurping the constitutional prerogatives of the President of the United States. And by the way, this is not just with bureaucracies, this is with the courts as well. We've seen the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals attempt to override the president's powers in terms of foreign affairs, immigration, national security with ridiculous rulings. Eventually they're overruled by the Supreme Court. But the sheer specter of a couple of judges in one circuit trying to make foreign policy over the will of the President of the United States in complete defiance of the Constitution, that's something I think most Americans never expected to see.
Well, certainly I didn't even know that there were 1,300 of these bureaucracies that are just out there rogue, renegade, if you will, without any supervision. So it's not surprising that the CFPB has kind of flown under the radar for most of us conservatives. You talk about 44 Democrat senators who hastily signed the argument against Mulvaney's selection. Who did Mulvaney select, and what's their objection?
Well, the objection was that they didn't get to select him. Plain and simple. We've seen 44 Democrat senators and the majority of the House of Representatives try to rule the country without the majority in the Senate and without the President of the United States, and certainly without the Supreme Court. So it's a real problem.
Well, you said that they didn't like his pick because they wanted someone more outspoken against Wall Street. What does that mean?
Well, you know what that means. It's the old left-wing saw that Wall Street are a bunch of right-wing plutocrats who are absolutely running the country, behind the scenes. Here's the secret story, though, of course. We know that in the last election, and in the election before that, and in the election before that, most of the Wall Street money went to liberal Democrats, not to conservative candidates. Right now, of course, we're in a certainly difficult phase. The president is doing what other presidents should have done a long time ago and stand up to China. But we're seeing all the bleating and the screaming from Wall Street that stock prices are dropping, not realizing, of course, that beating back China and its unfair trade practices will cause a major economic increase for the United States for decades and decades to come.
Well, great. And I look at your article, and it says that they're now giving them no funding. The agency gets no funding, zero funding. Is that a way to starve them out?
The agency head himself requested no funding until the mission of the organization was actually out there. Look, we've seen over probably the past 75 or 80 years how the bureaucracy has tried to overtake the democracy. And these organizations just never seem to go away. It's kind of like the old joke about a temporary tax. There's no such thing as a temporary tax. Right. They just continue on in perpetuity. There doesn't seem to be any such thing as a temporary federal agency either. A lot of people in government, particularly on the conservative side of the ledger, have said, shouldn't we at some point sit back, take a look at all these government bureaucracies and decide whether they really need to exist at all? You know, when you look at how the federal government is structured and how the entire country is supposed to be structured by the Constitution, is it right that the federal government has its arms in education, in so many different things that was never the purpose of the federal government to begin with? It was always conceived that the federal government was going to protect the nation, settle disputes between the states, protect the constitutional rights of individual Americans. This monstrosity which has occurred, particularly since the 1930s, has been outside of anything the Founding Fathers envisioned or expected.
Well, we are talking with our guest, Frank Venuccio, who has been talking about the CFPB, an errant, one of 1,300 errant regulatory commissions that was set up by President Obama, and now they've gone completely rogue. So you'll want to continue to listen to us after we come back from this break. We're coming to you from the Conservative Commandos Radio Network studios and around the world on the internet with TalkStream Live, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, American Political Radio, Leading Edge Radio Network, and AM/FM 24/7. And now you can watch our TV show on the AUN TV network in those great liberal places of San Francisco, San Rafael, Marin, North Bay, San Jose, Silicon Valley, Santa Rosa, Wine Country, Redding, Chico, Sacramento, Monterey, and soon to come to Nevada. We'll see how that works out. We'll be right back after this short break with Rick Trader. I'm Sharron Angle and our guest, Frank Venuccio.
I saw voter fraud with my own eyes. Now, people say, why didn't you report it to the authorities? Well, they were the ones doing it.
The integrity of one man, one vote doesn't apply at the Texas state legislature. There is no way to know if your representatives are voting for themselves.
Department, a Republican, reaches back to vote for Democrat Oliveira. Democrat Matt Reynolds votes for Republican England.
2 out of 3 voters nationwide believe that voter fraud is a serious problem in the U.S. today.
The process is rigged.
Both sides of the aisle are guilty.
Florida now has to tell the Department of Justice whether the state will comply with DOJ's demand to stop purging thousands of people from its voter rolls.
We have the sloppiest election system of any industrialized democracy.
Philadelphia flagged 50,000 duplicate registrations, so just think how many more slipped through.
It's almost impossible to detect. How do you get caught? You only get caught if you confess.
Election corruption is deeply embedded in America. Quote, election fraud is a crime that usually pays, unquote, writes Tracy Campbell in his book, Deliver the Vote, A History of Election Fraud, an American political tradition from 1742 to 2004. In 1742, the first Prime Minister of Britain in the American colonies, Robert Walpole, was forced to resign.
We have a right not to have our vote canceled out by someone who shouldn't be voting, someone who's an illegal alien, someone who's a felon not eligible to vote, someone who doesn't exist. If they vote, they cancel your vote out as much as if you're prevented from voting.
If this is going to be fixed, it's going to have to be a citizen effort. It comes down to, it's the same old question, if not now, when? If not us, then who?
This is huge. This is about the democracy and the principles of the United States of America. People say, but why you? Why you? Why not? And if it starts with a fireman, if it starts with a sanitation worker, if it starts with a teacher or a nurse or a caretaker of the elderly, then so be it. It's got to start somewhere. But it's time we come together and fix this problem once and for all.
There is no serious person out there who would suggest somehow that you could even rig America's elections.
To say that it doesn't exist is an outright lie.
Serious allegations of voter fraud, the claims raising questions about the
Commerce Secretary Ron Brown and 32 others were on a military plane that crashed today in a violent storm. There are no known survivors at this time.
The U.S. Army was funded by the evil entity.
saw voter fraud with my own eyes.
To say that it doesn't exist is an outright lie.
The process is rigged.
People die and fought for the right to vote. It's it's too brutal.
So it's incredibly important now that we draw a line and say, not on our watch.
And welcome back. Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos radio show with Sharron Engel and yours truly, Rick Trader. I want to give a shout out to the folks who listen to us on radio stations in Jacksonville, Tampa and the Villages, Florida, Las Vegas and Reno, Macon, Georgia, Lancaster and Pittsburgh, Boulder and Colorado Springs, Milwaukee, Pittsburgh, Long Beach, California, and now in Arlington, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. Our guest this segment is Frank Venuccio. Frank is the co-host of the Venuccio-Novak Report and the co-host of the American Political Zone, which is also seen on AUN TV in Northern California. Thanks for Frank. Thank you for holding through that break. We appreciate your time.
You know, Rick, I just wanted to add one thing that I thought of as the break was going on.
Sure.
With 1,300 federal agencies really running the government, can you blame Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for not realizing that there are 3 branches of the federal government?
Oh, maybe she calls them the 1,300 branches of the federal government.
Right up there with President Obama, who you recall in the his first election campaign, talked about the 57 states.
Yes, yeah. Hey, Frank, these 1,300 separate federal organizations, they weren't all created by Barack Obama, were they?
Oh, no, of course not. These have been going right back to the 1930s.
Yeah.
So it's been a long-standing thing.
So this liberal lunacy has been going on for a while. Frank, unaccountable. It's an unaccountable bureau. I mean, whose great idea is that? And unaccountable, my God, they could be a rogue government within a rogue government.
Yeah, they certainly could. But the whole purpose was, I understand how the Democrat left thinks.
Yeah.
They don't like to lose elections.
I understand that, but don't try to get my head wrapped around on what makes a Democrat think or what they think it is. You know, I just don't have the pay grade for that. Well,
the high idea of making an agency in the structure of the CPFB was that if, in fact, that unlikely event that the Democrats foresaw could not happen, of losing an election, it would be outside the jurisdiction of the elected government. Most of what we see on the left is an attempt to overcome the will of the American people. Let's be blunt. They don't really like this whole democracy republic thing. They, like any good socialist, want to make sure that the small group of people who are so much better than the rest of us get to permanently rule and permanently put their stamp on the government. And you do that by making a bureaucracy that you and I don't vote for, but that continues on in perpetuity, which the privileged elite have the tendency to run. Because, after all, again, they're so much better than the rest of us.
Absolutely. Frank, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, what was its original mission? What was it supposed to do? Like you said, that it has much to do with Wall Street. I mean, how is guarding Wall Street, how is that protecting the consumer? I mean, what is the mission of this organization originally? Or what was the mission originally?
You remember, Rick, that this came out of the Great Recession, the 2007, so many people lost out on money and things of that sort. Theoretically, the public purpose of it, of course, was to protect investors, protect consumers from the practices of stockbrokers, Wall Street, whatever. You know, it's sort of amorphous, I think, if you really look at it. But as with any bureaucracy, there's mission creep, and basically it was protecting us against ourselves because we're just too stupid to run our own financial lives.
Well, am I correct in thinking that Elizabeth Warren was the brainchild of this?
She claims to be, but this was more a conglomerate of a bunch of left-wing Democrats rather than Elizabeth Warren personally. But certainly she had a significant hand in it. It is a left-wing idea, and she was one of the matrons of left-wing ideas.
All right. Well, what I'm getting to is she's had a long reputation as hating banks.
Yes.
And I just was wondering if maybe this wasn't part of her personal vendetta against banks.
Probably was. I mean, I can't get into her head. I don't know what her personal motives are. I don't know what her spirit animal is. But I suppose that was part of her thinking.
Crow or wolf or bear, one of them. You know, Frank Venuccio, you have a great sense of humor. That's one of the things I like about you. A little dry, and I love a dry sense of humor. You know, Frank, I, like Sharron, can't get over this idea that this is one of approximately 1,300 separate federal organizations that are part of America's national government. Could you give me a few other examples of these 1,300?
Well, they're ones that involve. I have a copy right here of the federal handbook. And it's amazing that we have a handbook that's about 1,000 pages long that lists all these other bureaucracies. But you can go more by type of activities. For example, if you're a farmer, and you happen to have a large puddle on your property or a small lake on your property, we know that subdivisions of the Environmental Protection Agency will tell you that somehow or other that puddle or that little lake is a navigable river. That somehow the EPA and the federal government has control over that because of it. If you are a fellow up in Maine who fishes for lobsters and sends them down to New York City or Connecticut or any place around the country, there are federal agencies that tell you what type of container you can put your lobster in for shipment. You know, so you get into ridiculously small things like that. Can you imagine some guy, he lives on the coast of Maine, he follows in his daddy's footsteps. He goes out with a couple of traps. He collects lobsters to make a few extra bucks. He sells them to restaurants in New York City. And then he finds out that all of a sudden some regulation was passed telling them that he can't use a styrofoam container. He has to use something else. This is the type of things that Americans are facing.
Yeah, we had a guest on last week, Frank. Gentleman was talking about the new type of gas can. It actually takes 3 ends to use. I guess that's part of that garbage. Well, Mick Mulvaney, you know, President Trump has appointed acting director Mick Mulvaney, and this is because Cordray stepped down as director to run for governor, allowing the president to do this. Acting director, why is acting part of his title?
Well, until the process is confirmed by the White House, and I guess there's supposed to be some Senate oversight, although that's debatable in the way the CPFB is set up. But until he's actually confirmed, that's why he's acting.
Okay. You also have down here that, and you and Sharron were talking about this, that acting director Mulvaney requested absolutely zero funds for the agency for the second quarter of FY 2018 until it was clear how and when to spend the funds. That makes sense to me, but apparently that's rubbing the Democrats the wrong way.
Well, you know, looking at it from the Democrats' perspective, they have a lot to worry about. If this does set a precedent, then all of those 1,300 or so agencies might at some point be challenged to state what their real mission is and what their real authority is. Otherwise, they get zeroed out in the budget. So the Democrats are absolutely right to be concerned about this, but the American people should be thrilled about it because maybe this is one of those avenues we can start to take if we have enough authority. You know, if we keep the White House, if we take back the House, maybe we can start going through these agencies one by one. And if we are successful in doing that, knock them out of the ballpark.
On a side note, Frank Venuccio, Executive Order 1377-1, requiring all agencies to eliminate 2 regulations for every new regulation put in place. How's that working?
It's actually starting to work fairly well. the high water mark for regulations was during the Obama administration. I don't recall the exact number, but we reached more pages in the Federal Register than we ever had before, more new regulations.
Right.
The point that the president makes, and a lot of people, Chamber of Commerce and others make, is that it is impossible for a business person to keep up with this nonsense, with these increased regulations that never stop. So the idea is to knock down the regulations to a small but manageable number. Now, you know the cliche that ignorance of the law is no excuse. You're still guilty if you broke a law that you didn't know exist. But the Anglo-American jurisprudence background of that was really the common law. You know that it's not right to steal. You know it's not right to rustle your neighbor's cattle. You know it's not right to rob or rape or kill. Those are common things. But if you ship your lobster in the wrong type of box, I mean, that's not something that you grew up knowing all about.
No, absolutely not. New York Analysis of Policy and Government. You're the editor-in-chief. What do you guys do there?
Well, we try to take a look at the various issues facing the country, and rather than do the screaming head routine, we put in research, real research, try to look at what the law says, try to look what the facts say, and produce one article a day, 6 days a week on those issues. And we hope to provide a more in-depth look at the issues rather than the kind of nonsense that you see in the Washington Post and the New York Times.
Well, Frank, you do that research, and I'll do the screaming head thing. How's that work? I got Sharron here. She tries to simmer me down every now and then. Frank Venuccio, we want to thank you so much for joining us. Please tell our audience how they can keep track of what you do, what you write, where you talk, what radio stations, what TV stations. Frank, you're all over.
Well, the best way is usagovpolicy.com. Listen to the Conservative Commandos. Listen to the AUN Television Network. That's the best way to keep in touch with us. And by the way, if you send us your email, send that to truthandradio@gmail.com, and we'll put you on our free list. You'll get a summary of our weekly reports every week.
All right, Frank Venuccio, we want to thank you once again for joining us. Say hello to Daria for me, all right?
I certainly will.
Talked to her for a while.
It's been great being with you both.
Take care, and God bless.
You too.
And you are listening and watching the Conservative Commandos radio show with Sharron Engel and yours truly, Rick Trader. On the other side, we're going to be talking about Twitter. Twitter banning the AOC parody site. It's progressive privileges at its finest. Don't go away. Sharron and I will be back with our next guest.
Have you been leasing a property for your business or renting storage space? Are you tired of paying rent year after year? Call the experts at General Steel to own a building at up to 30% off now.
I'd been renting a building and paying someone else's mortgage, but General Steel showed me how I could own a space tailored to the needs of my business and for less than renting.
Call General Steel now at the number on your screen for our current building specials and to price your metal building system today.
My building's the dream I've had since finishing my house 14 years ago. I've been using it for a garage, workshop, and storage area for my tools and equipment, and I can't believe how great it turned out.
The economy is improving, and the price of steel is expected to rise. Stop waiting. It could cost you thousands. Call General Steel now to see how you can own for less than you thought. Stop waiting to start your business or expand your operation. Call General Steel now.
Call 877-484-7002.
Everybody wants cheap airfare, but where do you find it? You call low-cost airlines. Their prices are direct from the airlines, and they're so low you can't find these fares published anywhere. They specialize in cheap flights, discount hotel rooms, cheap car rental rates, and great package deals anywhere around the world. Wherever you want to go, they can help you get there cheaply and with a best price guarantee. If you want the lowest prices on your airline tickets or other travel services, call now. That's right, call. That's the only way to get these rates. Experts are standing by 24/7 to get you the cheapest airfare and hotel rates available. So don't wait. Call right now for the lowest travel prices anywhere and for great last-minute travel deals too.
Call 888-431-0562. That's 888-431-0562. 888-431-0562. 888-431-0562.
Friend, do you remember when it felt good to withdraw your cash from the bank to expand a business, go on vacation, or buy a new car? Well, today, withdrawing your own cash has become a very risky business, according to The Secret War, a shocking new research report. I just read it. And folks, I was amazed to learn why banks are now required to spy on us for the government and then report any suspicious or unusual behavior. I suggest you get The Secret War free. Just call the number on the screen, no charge, from the folks at Swiss America. And get this, did you know simply spending cash today may be enough to have you branded as a potential criminal? That's right. The new war on cash is really a war against all freedom-loving Americans. The Secret War is yours free, so call the number on the screen and you can tell them Pat Boone gave you the number.
And this is the Conservative Commandos radio show. I'm Rick Trader. My co-host today is Sharron Angle. For rebroadcasts of our show, check out our website, CCRShow.com. That's CCRShow.com. And on there, you'll find rebroadcast of our radio show, our TV show there. A lot of great articles and a lot of great information. At least we think so. Facebook, not so much. But with that, Sharron, please make the introduction of our next guest.
Well, it's always an honor to introduce Patrice Lee Onwuka, who is a senior policy analyst at Independent Women's Forum. Patrice has worked in the advocacy and communication fields for more than a decade, and prior to joining IWF, Patrice served as national spokeswoman and communications director at Generation Opportunity, and worked at the Philanthropy Roundtable and the Fund for American Studies in policy and media roles. She also held consulting roles as a speechwriter for the United Nations spokesman and manager for a student travel program to South Africa. Patrice, welcome back to the Conservative Commandos radio show.
Thank you so much, Sharron. And Rick, it's great to see you all.
Well, you have written a couple of articles that we're interested in, but I'm going to focus on the first one. Twitter banning AOC parody site is progressive privilege at its finest. So we have we say that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, is one of our most prolific topics here on Conservative Commandos radio show. We have a good time with her stuff because obviously, I would never send a child of mine to Boston College after finding out that she graduated from there with a degree in economics, and then what she did to New York City economically. She just provides a lot of content for humor. And there's a parody out there that has said, she's great. We could just make her our total focus. Well, somehow Twitter doesn't think it's funny. Is that right? What's going on?
That's a good point, Sharron. Yes, AOC provides plenty of fodder, and not even personal attacks. I mean, just her economic thinking really is head scratching very often. So you have a Twitter account called @AOC Press that gained some attention. They had apparently over 85,000 followers. They would literally just take what she said and turn it around into a parody, which probably was very easy to do. Well, Twitter didn't like that too much and recently banned them permanently. Even the guy who ran the account, his personal Twitter page was also banned. And Twitter says that I guess the parody was I don't think they really gave an answer for why they were banned. And the irony here is I did a quick search and found Trump parody accounts, Kellyanne Conway parody accounts that were much smaller, but were certainly still in full effect. So I think this is progressive privilege at its finest, meaning if you're a progressive, if you're a liberal, you get away with a lot more, or you get treated with kid gloves compared to if you are a conservative. And I think that's what's going on here. At least we don't have any evidence to point to anything else.
We here at Conservative Commandos radio show have been feeling a pinch ourselves with Facebook. We haven't quite managed to get ourselves acknowledged by Twitter yet, but it seems that there is a liberal bias against anyone conservative on whether it's Facebook or Twitter. And how would you think about this as discrimination? Do you think this is discrimination, and don't we have laws against that kind of stuff?
Well, it certainly seems like conservative accounts, conservatives on social media are the targets at a greater rate than I think progressives or those on the left. I mean, there's a reason why Antifa continues to have Facebook accounts and Twitter accounts, and they certainly advocate for some and use violent means to get their point across. And then you've got conservatives like Ben Shapiro and some other folks on the right, some call them far right, I don't know, but who have been banned, been literally kicked off of platforms. What I really worry about, Sharron, is when you consider that, I believe it was 2016, Facebook admitted that some of their staff were stifling, they were controlling the trending topics to keep out conservatives and conservative topics from trending. And that's a really important feature because people look at what's trending to see what's going on in the world. So if you're censoring what is hot and happening, then you are controlling what people are seeing and you're controlling the discourse. So you've got here the Mark Zuckerbergs, you've got here the Facebook founders talking about, maybe we've been aggressive in the past and they plan to fix it. Well, I don't know about you, but it seems like they still have a lot of work to do, especially if they claim to be a public sphere or a place for democracy and freedom of speech.
Well, in your article, you say Twitter is not a government or public square. It can set rules for who can or cannot engage on the platform. However, the company opens itself up to criticism when it claims to be a place for free speech. Twitter says, and this is a quote, this is a platform for users to share and receive a wide range of ideas and content. So they seem to be violating their own policy here if they really are interested in free speech.
Well, yeah, I think that's the challenge. I mean, we totally understand that these are private companies. And as a private company, you get to set your own rules. You get to determine who comes on and off your platform and for what reason. That's totally fine. We as users, we have to abide by those guidelines if we want to participate. However, if you are saying that you are a public square, a place for freedom of thought, of different viewpoints, then it seems very hollow if you claim that's your mission statement, but your actions demonstrate something totally different. And I think that's the challenge that a lot of social media companies are facing. They want to claim to be and provide a place where different viewpoints are provided, but at the same time, they're trying to censor different types of content. And there may be good reason for censoring. Like, I don't think we want to see Islamic extremists, for example, pushing out their opinions. But do we really need to censor, black conservatives who, like President Trump? That's a good question to ask.
Okay, so now we have a name. I want to name a name here so that our listeners can know exactly who these guys are, because that always is an irritation to me when someone says, well, they said. Well, we want to know who this guy is, and you put it right here in your article. Twitter's CEO, Jack Dorsey, even remarked that they were too aggressive in banning conservative accounts. He said they would fix the problem. Well, how's he going to do that? And how should we urge him to do that? Is there a way for us to get more proactive, if you will, with the CEO there at Twitter, Jack Dorsey?
Well, I mean, I think there's something to using his own platform to kind of holding him accountable to the words he's spoken. Retweeting his own tweets and from that speech, for example, is a good starting point. They say the best way to put out your opinion is your money. So if conservatives left Twitter en masse, I think that would be a very interesting situation. Imagine if President Trump decided to shut down his Twitter account. I mean, boy, oh boy, that would be bad, because then we don't get to hear from the president directly.
Wait, didn't they do that already at one point?
They might have.
They did that about a year ago. They shut down his account. They had to reopen it and apologize. But for a time, sorry to interrupt, Sharron, but for a time they did exactly that, Patrice. They shut off Donald Trump's Twitter account.
Well, and they can do that. But I think if we decide, we need to find a different platform. I mean, the free market is great because that's where competition comes in. The challenge is that Twitter is massive, I guess, billions potentially of users, or at least hundreds of millions of users right now. So anyone starting out, they're going to start out from a position of David versus Goliath. But that's not to say that nothing is impossible. If you can remember back, I remember before there was Facebook, there was Friendster. If I remember that right, I think Friendster was the bigger social media platform way back when, and now it doesn't even exist. So, anything is possible in a free market system.
Well, so we need to find Jack Dorsey, right? JackDorsey on Twitter, and begin tweeting on his Twitter feed about this concern we have that he's not a free speech advocate at all, that he doesn't love the Constitution, and perhaps he might even be anti-American. What other messages should we send to Jack Dorsey there at Twitter?
Well, ensuring that when it comes to complaints of those whose accounts have been shut down, that the people who are reviewing those complaints are not viewing them through the lens of, well, I don't like the message because it's conservative, it's supportive of Trump, it's X, Y, and Z, but actually looking at it as, does this violate our terms of condition? Does it violate our guidelines? And if not, then even if I don't like it as an employee of Twitter or as an employee of any social media company, I still shouldn't I shouldn't shut it down just because I disagree with the actual content. And so there's a user element. There's an employee element that's a part of this, and then there is the actual just how their algorithms and how they determine what kind of content we get to see and what kind we don't get to see. I think all of that plays a role.
Well, I'm certainly going to be a friend of Jack Dorsey's, I think. So we're going to, maybe we should do that with Facebook too, find out what their CEO's handle is there on Facebook and
Mark Zuckerberg.
And good. And start posting post on his page as well. We are talking with Patrice Lee Onwuka of the Independent Women's Forum about Twitter banning AOC parody site is progressive privilege at its finest. We are coming to you from the Conservative Commandos Radio Network studios and around the world on the internet with TalkStream Live, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, American Political Radio, Leading Edge Radio Network, and AM/FM 24/7. And now you can watch our TV show on AUN TV Network in Northern California. Rick Trader, my co-host, and I will be right back with our guest after these messages.
AM/FM 24/7 Roku channel broadcasts all of our shows on demand. To ensure reliability, we store and stream our content on the same servers as Netflix and Amazon. Our Roku channel is free to use, and anyone owning one of the more than 10 million Roku devices can watch our channel at no cost whatsoever. If you have a television show or are thinking about producing a show, you can be a part of AM/FM 24/7's Roku channel. Watch our great shows on your Roku device. It's free and more reliable than cable TV. Are you stuck with a timeshare? Did you attend the presentation and were seduced and enticed into buying that great vacation and investment? Now you're in the terrible position of trying to figure out a way to get out of that mess. You're not alone. For over 15 years, BuyYourTimeshare.com has been helping people like yourself get out of timeshare ownership. The fact is there is no resale market. Unscrupulous telemarketers call you and say they have buyers waiting, and the next thing that happens is you give them hundreds of dollars for an ad, and you'll never hear from them again. Another fact is that an identical timeshare to yours is being offered on eBay for $1.
and no one is buying it. If you want out of your timeshare, I urge you to go to buyyourtimeshare.com or call them at 877-94-HELP-ME. That number again is 877-94-HELP-ME. Buyyourtimeshare.com. That's buyyourtimeshare.com. 877-94-HELP-ME.
Dish TV is better than cable TV. Here's why. Dish has the nation's lowest TV price, along with an award-winning DVR that can skip commercials, record 8 shows at once, and get access to thousands of movies at your fingertips. Cable simply can't even compare. So the smart choice is to cut the cable and get Dish. Plus, you get all these great TV features, free HD DVR upgrade, free installation, and free movie channels. Say goodbye to cable and get more with Dish TV. 877-290-7764, 877-290-7764. As an added bonus, you can switch to Dish now and receive a $50 Visa gift card. So call now and get Dish TV. Call 877-290-7764, 877-290-7764. That's 877-290-7764. Limited time offer, 24-month commitment and credit qualification required. Cancellation fee, monthly equipment fees, and other restrictions apply. Promotion can change at any time.
Welcome back. Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos radio show. I'm Rick Trader. My co-host today is Sharron Angle. And I once again want to give a shout out to the folks who listen to us on stations in Jacksonville, Tampa, and the Villages, Florida, Las Vegas and Reno, Macon, Georgia, Lancaster and Pittsburgh, Boulder and Colorado Springs, Milwaukee, Long Beach, California, and now Arlington, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. As Rick Manning says, if you can't find us, you're just not looking. Also, you can see us on AUN TV. Our guest is Patrice Onwuka. She's a senior policy analyst at the Independent Women's Forum. We've been talking about Twitter banning AOC parody site as progressive privilege at its finest. Patrice, thanks for holding through that break. We appreciate your time.
Sure.
Patrice, he also wrote another article about Kamala Harris should not axe her tax cuts. But before we get to that, I wanted to comment on a couple of things that you and Sharron were talking about in the first segment. Sharron, I think, mischaracterized us, the Conservative Commandos radio show, as being pinched by Facebook. I say it's mischaracterized. We haven't been pinched. We have joined the list of banned sites.
Wow.
Our website, CCRShow.com, has been banned by Facebook as, quote, violating their community standards. When we ask for a review, they refuse to review that. At least they haven't done that in 2 weeks. You and Sharron were talking about Twitter being a private company, Facebook being a private company, and you said, well, maybe they have a right to do business with whom they want to. But let me ask you this, Patrice, as being a black lady. What if I had a company and didn't want to deal with you because you were black or you were a female? Isn't that discrimination?
It is, according to the law, federal law and state laws. The challenge is that conservatism or philosophical thought is not a protected class, the way race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation is also a protected class. So those are protected by law, which means that if you are discriminated against, that you can find legal remedy. As a conservative, as someone who leans right in our thinking, who embraces free markets, who embraces individual responsibility, we don't necessarily get that same kind of protection. Now, there's nothing wrong in advocating and pushing forward for the Constitution to be amended in terms of our laws pertaining to discrimination, to add philosophical thought as a protected class.
I don't think it had.
I don't know what it would take, but it would be interesting.
I think just an act of Congress, actually, because I don't think it was a constitutional amendment that made certain groups more privileged than others. I really don't. So maybe what we need is some people. I would love for conservatives, Patrice. I've shared with this Sharron before. I would love for conservatives to be as litigious as liberals. Use the courts the way the liberals have to push their agendas. One other question I want to ask you about. You as you served as national spokesman and communications director for Generation Opportunity. You also worked at the Philanthropy Roundtable and the Fund for American Studies. So you know communications, Patrice.
Mm-hmm.
Another tool I think we should start using and heavily is our conservative dollars. I think that we should take a page out of the Barack Obama playbook and reward our friends and punish our enemies. I think that we should go on a national campaign for users of Facebook and Twitter to boycott their advertisers. Your thoughts on that idea?
I'd love to see a little bit more. Can you flesh that out a bit more for me? What do you mean by boycotting their advertisers?
Well,
like clicking on the links that pop up?
By not clicking on the links and also posting comments that we will not deal with your company because you advertise on Facebook, and Facebook is discriminating against conservatives and people that have Judeo-Christian views. And by doing that, you, Mr. Advertiser, are missing out on a large dollar, and you, Mr. Advertiser, are also discriminating.
It would be interesting, I think, to see that happen. Here's the pushback that I see. It seems to work very well when the causes are progressive, that people are boycotting advertisers for. When it's a progressive cause, they seem to listen. When it's a conservative cause, I don't know if advertisers in these companies actually respond in the same way. That's not to say it couldn't happen or wouldn't work, but I'm just making an observation. But I think your points about, we need to use our speak with our dollars is a really good point. When a company recognizes that its clients are leaving, and that's a market signal simply of price and demand. If we are not satisfied with the services that we're getting and we go elsewhere, or even for a short period of time stop using goods and services, they do pay attention. And so, yeah, perhaps a national campaign doing that could wake up some of these companies.
Well, I'm with you on that. Patrice, we only got about a minute or so left, but I really wanted to touch on another one of your articles because I think it's important. Kamala Harris should not axe our tax cuts. In a minute or so, could you tell us a little bit about that article?
Kamala Harris is running for president. We know that. And her tax policy plan would be to overturn the 2017 Republican-passed tax cuts under President Trump, get rid of them entirely, and replace it with a tax plan of her own, which really is like Robin Hood in reverse. It takes from all of us and gives to just a few. Now, realize what this means. This means it would be repealing the doubling of the standard deduction, the doubling of the child tax credit, the tax cuts on the individual side that every income level received. And this is not just coming from like a right-leaning tax policy center. Left-leaning tax foundation, left-leaning tax organizations recognize that there were tax cuts for every income level in 2017. She wants to overturn that, and she's using her line about this being about the wealthy benefiting, which the Washington Post gave her 4 Pinocchios for, and she instead wants to give some sort of tax plan that would give certain families kind of a tax credit that they could take either at the end of the year or on a monthly basis. Again, she is taking from all of us workers who have benefited from the tax reform in different ways, including corporations and small family businesses that had their taxes cut. She wants to wipe that all out and replace that with her tax plan that would really just go to a few targeted potential voters. That is the wrong thing we need right now. The economy is stellar. Unemployment is low, and it is because of smart growth, tax cuts, and deregulation that we have that. She wants to wipe that out and turn things around. Oh, by the way, Joe Biden wants to do the same thing. I say, no way, Jose.
Well, maybe they'll do a little research on Walter Mondale. Just throw that out there.
Okay.
Patrice Onwuka, Independent Women's Forum. I love the ladies at the Independent Women's Forum. I really do. But Patrice, please tell our listeners how they could follow your work and the work of the IWF.
Please go to iwf.org. We've got blogs, we've got opinion pieces, videos, all the commentary you can imagine on hot topics of the day.
All right. Patrice Onwuka, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Take care and God bless.
Thank you. You too. Good to see you both.
Same. Well, it's good to see you too. And this is the Conservative Commandos radio show. I'm Rick Trader. My co-host is Sharron Angle. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
AM/FM 24/7 Roku channel broadcasts all of our shows on demand. To ensure reliability, we store and stream our content on the same servers as Netflix and Amazon. Our Roku channel is free to use, and anyone owning one of the more than 10 million Roku devices can watch our channel at no cost whatsoever. If you have a television show or are thinking about producing a show, you can be a part of AM/FM 24/7's Roku channel. Watch our great shows on your Roku device. It's free and more reliable than cable TV. Are you stuck with a timeshare? Did you attend the presentation and were seduced and enticed into buying that great vacation and investment? Now you're in the terrible position of trying to figure out a way to get out of that mess. You're not alone. For over 15 years, BuyYourTimeshare.com has been helping people like yourself get out of timeshare ownership. The fact is there is no resale market. Unscrupulous telemarketers call you and say they have buyers waiting, and the next thing that happens is you give them hundreds of dollars for an ad, and you'll never hear from them again. Another fact is that an identical timeshare to yours is being offered on eBay for $1, and no one is buying it. If you want out of your timeshare, I urge you to go to buyyourtimeshare.com or call them at 877-94-HELP-ME. That number again is 877-94-HELP-ME. Buyyourtimeshare.com. That's buyyourtimeshare.com. 877-94-HELP-ME.
Dish TV is better than cable TV. Here's why. Dish has the nation's lowest TV price, along with an award-winning DVR that can skip commercials, record 8 shows at once, and get access to thousands of movies at your fingertips. Cable simply can't even compare. So the smart choice is to cut the cable and get Dish. Plus, you get all these great TV features, free HD DVR upgrade, free installation, and free movie channels. Say goodbye to cable and get more with Dish TV. 877-290-7764, 877-290-7764. As an added bonus, you can switch to Dish now and receive a $50 Visa gift card. So call now and get Dish TV. Call 877-290-7764, 877-290-7764. That's 877-290-7764. Limited time offer, 24-month commitment and credit qualification required. Cancellation fee, monthly equipment fees, and other restrictions apply. Promotion can change at any time.
Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos radio show with Dr. Wright, Dr. Nasser Sheikh, and yours truly, Rick Trader. For rebroadcasts of our shows, please check out our website, ccrshow.com. That's ccrshow.com. On there, you'll find our radio show, our TV show, a lot of great articles, and a lot of great information. Very pleased to have our next guest, Congressman Bob Barr. He represented Georgia's 7th Congressional District in the House of Representatives from 1995 to 2003. He now practices law in Atlanta, Georgia, and he's the chairman of Liberty Guard, a nonprofit pro-liberty organization. He also heads the Legal Enforcement Education Foundation and a consulting firm, Liberty Strategies. Congressman Barr, welcome to the Conservative Commandos radio show.
Rick, it's great to be with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, we appreciate you joining us, and you wrote a very interesting article on Town Hall. A hero's funeral is a lesson for all of us, for us all, I should say. And in here you write, Riley Howe was laid to rest last week in Waynesville, North Carolina, at a funeral service with full military honors. He was not killed in the Middle East war zone. He was not even an enlisted member of the armed services. Congressman Barr, please tell us about Riley Howe and why he got a military funeral.
This young man and a few others like him in recent years are doing what so many of their fellow citizens fail to do, and that is to realize that there is one way and one way only to meet evildoers, and that is to meet them head on, not to cower, not to run, but to go after them. And while it's unfortunate on the one hand that we even need to be discussing how to defend oneself in a school against a shooter, unfortunately in today's world, these are problems that we have to deal with. And what the federal government tells people, and that is to run, hide, and only then fight if you absolutely have to, is a recipe that encourages rather than discourages shooters. Most of these shooters are cowards anyway, and if you go after them head on like Riley did, even at peril to yourself, as an American should do, and that is to go after evildoers, that is the very best way to defend yourself and others who are in danger. So rather than run, hide, fight, it ought to be in the opposite prioritization. Fight ought to be number one, not running away from these people. That encourages them because they're cowards to begin with.
Well, Congressman, you write in your article, Riley's final act of life, saving others regardless of cost, was the ultimate expression of humanity. You know, as I was reading that and reading your article, Congressman, it made me think of the let's roll. Remember what happened during 9/11? The passengers on the one plane that went down in Schwanksville, Pennsylvania, they didn't sit and wait for someone else to control their destiny. They rolled. They acted, and in doing so, probably saved countless lives on that aircraft.
Well, perhaps even mine, because there is evidence that plane was heading to the Capitol building in Washington, which is where I was that day, along with my colleagues in the House of Representatives and the Senate. And that's the way America was formed. We weren't a nation of people who run from danger. We were formed as a nation of people who confront danger, who assume risks, and who take the responsibility to protect ourselves, our family, and our friends. And too often in today's world, you have people say, well, it's somebody else's responsibility. It's the government's responsibility. It's the police. It's the school's responsibility. No, it's your responsibility. There is even to be honest, there is Supreme Court case law that says it is not the responsibility of the police to protect you. It's your responsibility as an individual. But we don't teach that so much in our culture anymore. Riley Howell exhibited that as a true American hero, and that's why he was honored at his funeral in the way that he so appropriately was.
Riley Howell injured the attacker. When Riley reacted, knocking him down, he injured the attacker, and the attacker complained of internal injuries after the incident. And even though Riley, unfortunately, was killed, probably saved a lot of others. And in your article, you talk about some other heroes in action. You talk about the San Diego synagogue shooting 2 weeks ago. An unarmed Army veteran in the congregation rushed and shouted at the shooter was enough to send him scurrying to his car, and that he was quickly apprehended. Fortunately, in this situation, this Army veteran was not shot and wounded, but his actions alone of just charging this coward, this individual, saved lives at the synagogue.
The lessons are the examples are manifold. We see this over and over again. On the other end of the spectrum, of course, on the other end of the spectrum, from heroes like Wiley and the veteran that you just described at the synagogue in San Diego a few weeks ago, on the other end of that spectrum, we have what happened at the high school in Parkland, Florida, a little over a year ago, in which there was a police officer on the scene, and he did nothing. I mean, that is absolutely outrageous. In addition to, of course, as you probably recall, in the Parkland, Florida shooting, there were all sorts of danger signs that the federal government had and local law enforcement had about this individual. I think his name was Cruz or something, but they did nothing. But even then, at the last moment, when they could have done something, that sheriff hesitated and did nothing. And that is the absolute wrong message to send to everybody in this country. The way you confront these shooters, again, who are cowards to begin with, is to confront them aggressively as possible. And because so much can happen so quickly in these situations, time is very much of the essence. Even if you don't take the shooter down, just rushing him, sending him off balance, or distracting his attention will be enough for the others to assist you or for him to start running away.
Well, since that time, there have been some changes in the training, hasn't there been?
There have been, and the situation down in Parkland, Florida, with the sheriff, I think it was Sheriff Israel, former sheriff, thank goodness, down there,
goodness for that.
Really was sort of a wake-up call. And a lot of law enforcement agencies are teaching how far better to confront these shooters rather than, sort of sit back and wait for the cavalry to arrive.
Well, Congressman Barr, let's talk a little bit about soft targets, and I want to talk about these gun-free zones. When we look back of the history of these mass shootings, all but about one or two took place in these gun-free zones. And yet on the other side, on the left side, instead of looking at the situation, looking at the statistics, looking at the proof, the evidence, they continue to double down on gun-free zones, and instead of arming, they still want to disarm. Could you talk about that?
It's absolutely unfathomable that what the left is doing, what so many on the left are doing, and that is they keep going back to the same recipe. If there is a gun crime, their solution is gun control. Then if there is a crime involving firearms after that, their solution is, we didn't impose enough gun control in the first place, obviously, because there's been another shooting. So they just ratcheted up another notch, and another notch, and ultimately, what you wind up with are exactly what you said, and that is a shooter's prime target, and that is a gun-free zone. You don't have to arm every teacher. That's not the point. The point is that you don't create a gun-free zone in the first place. You're absolutely correct, with very few exceptions. We had that, I think the Islamic shooter at Fort Hood a few years ago, one or two others, but with very, very few exceptions, these mass shootings occur in gun-free or perceived gun-free zones, primarily schools. Those are the soft targets that they look for, and churches. And it doesn't matter whether it's an elementary school, as in Newtown, Connecticut several years ago, or a university such as Virginia Tech 10 years or so ago. Schools are known because of the liberal mindset of state governments particularly that say, these are schools, we have to keep guns out. They are prime targets for shooters.
Congressman, you write in your article, these criminals pick soft targets, easy soft targets. Victims are seen as unprotected and vulnerable. And I think of a couple of instances, and you mentioned one, the Fort Hood shooting, The other is the Navy Yard shooting. Has things changed or has policies changed at our military bases, where our military bases now are not seen as soft targets? Has the laws changed? Has the thinking changed? The policies changed to make even our military bases safer?
Not to the extent that they should, Rick. This is something that has to be imposed. It doesn't even require a change in the law. Mm-hmm. It simply requires a president, a secretary of defense who understand that when you have men and women in the military who are sworn to protect our nation's security, who are trained in firearms, to require that no person other than a military police officer, for example, can maintain a firearm either on their presence or in their living place while they're stationed at a U.S. military base is ridiculous. But that still remains the official policy of the United States government. It's absurd, it's counterproductive, and it's ultimately dangerous.
Congressman Bob Barr, a couple examples I would like to use now that shows how gun control has hurt and an individual violating a gun-free zone has actually saved lives. One instance, I want to talk about the Santa Barbara shooting a few years ago, where 14 people were killed, another 20 people were injured. Some would say we don't need to be protecting ourselves. We have the police, but in that situation, the police were only 1 mile away, 5 minutes away. But as I said, 14 people were killed, 20 others hurt. There was another situation in a gun-free zone in Darby, Pennsylvania a few years ago, where a mental patient went in, shot and killed his social worker, shot his doctor, but he was stopped there because his doctor had a gun. His doctor used that gun to shoot this criminal. Now, there you've got two situations of gun-free zones. One where the people in the at that Christmas party were not protected. The other, a doctor stopped this criminal with a gun that he had there illegally. Do you think that there should be legislation, there should be laws giving people the right to protect themselves, no matter where they are?
Absolutely, there should be, and this gets, Rick, back to a very fundamental question, and that is the scope of the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. Looked at in the context of both the history of our government and the history of the Bill of Rights, and in the history of other amendments to our Constitution, the only conclusion one can reach if one looks at the Second Amendment, which establishes the individual right to keep and bear arms. It's not for hunting, it's not for gun collecting, it's for protection of oneself and one's family, one's home place. And you marry that to the 14th Amendment, which says that no state can infringe the privileges or immunities of citizenship, which means that a state cannot impose limitations that take away a pre-existing right of a citizen of this country, which the right to keep and bear arms is. It wasn't given to us by the Second Amendment. It was protected by the Second Amendment. Then the only conclusion is that the states cannot infringe the basic right to keep and bear arms for self-protection, for self-defense. And yet we still have, even though the Supreme Court has made clear its understanding that the Second Amendment protects the individual right to keep and bear arms, there still are myriad limitations that individual states and localities have placed on the right of a person to possess a firearm for self-defense. There is nothing more important than that fundamental right, and yet it is seems to be the most easy for states to get away with limiting.
Congressman, but it seems like the liberals continue to win and to push this argument. What's it going to take for conservatives to not only challenge them, but to go on the offensive to preserve our First Amendment or Second Amendment rights? And by the way, I always say here on the Conservative Commandos, our show is brought to you by the First Amendment, protected by the Second, because I think one does go hand in hand. But we see more and more gun control laws being put on the books. Take, for instance, New Jersey. You know, in New Jersey, you cannot even possess a BB gun. A BB gun you cannot possess in the state of New Jersey because they say that's a high-capacity weapon. What's it going to take for conservatives to take back the narrative?
Actually, President Trump, in appointing the two justices to the Supreme Court, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, hopefully has made a major step in that direction so that when the next significant Second Amendment case does get to the Supreme Court, we will have at least a 5-4 majority to stop, not just to stop further limitations on the Second Amendment, but to proactively establish the primacy of the Second Amendment against state limitations. Thus far, we've been fighting a rearguard defensive action. And I like you, your question puts it in exactly the proper perspective. How can we proactively and aggressively, it doesn't even have to be aggressive, let's just proactively assert the right to keep and bear arms and to get it back to where it should be and was intended to be, and that is as a primary right of a citizen of this country that cannot be taken away by a state or local government. Hopefully, with those two new justices, relatively new justices on the court, and hopefully we'll have another one that Trump can name very shortly, at least that will be the final bulwark against further limitations. But the real battles have to be fought in the state legislatures. And it's going to take citizen action, joining and working with organizations from the NRA, on whose board I serve, to the Gun Owners of America, to the Citizens' Right to Keep and Bear Arms, Alan Gottlieb's group out on the West Coast. It's very important for people to join these organizations and support these organizations, even if it's with just a annual $25 a year or whatnot. That's one thing that every citizen can do, and that is to proactively join and support these pro-Second Amendment groups. And then secondly, of course, is to stop electing wishy-washy Republicans to office who do not understand and who are not willing to stand and fight for the Second Amendment.
Congressman Bob Barr, do you have a minute or so to tell us about the Law Enforcement Education Foundation?
Sure, I appreciate that. The Law Enforcement Education Foundation, or LEEF, we have a website, Law EEF, and I had that. It's just a small organization, but we raise money and we provide small grants to law enforcement groups, sheriff's offices, first responders, and so forth, to meet their needs, such as vests or helmets that their local budgets don't provide for them.
Congressman, one of the things that I would love to see, again, getting back to the narrative. We always hear about gun violence, but I think it's going to take an education thing. It's not gun violence, it's criminal violence. That's the basis of it. It's criminal violence. You agree?
Sure, it is. It's not the gun that commits an act of violence. It's an individual who commits an act of violence, and that's a very, very good point that is often overlooked in these debates. And that is, it's not gun violence. It's criminal violence, and it's often a gun that is saving the day. we held a hearing long ago when I was still in the House, back in the mid or late 90s. We held more than one hearing and we focused on people who protected themselves through the use of a firearm or through simply having a firearm at the right place at the right time. Sometimes you don't even have to use it. Just having a firearm that you can have with you at the time when you're confronted with a criminal at your house or at the school or whatnot is sufficient. And yet, all we see in the Congress year after year nowadays is looking at the other side of the equation, gun violence, not gun protection, not individual defense, but putting the onus on the firearm, not on the criminal.
Congressman Bob Barr, we want to thank you so much for joining us here on Conservative Commandos. Please tell our audience how they could follow your work, read your articles, and also find out more about the Law Enforcement Education Foundation.
Sure. It's been a pleasure being with you, and they can either go to my website, bobbarr.org, or the Law Enforcement Education Foundation .org, LAWEEF, laweef.org.
Congressman Bob Barr, again, thank you for joining us. Take care, and God bless.
Same to you and your listeners. Thanks again for having me, and thank you for spreading the message of freedom.
You bet. That's what we all need to do. Bye-bye.
AM/FM 24/7 Roku channel broadcasts all of our shows on demand. To ensure reliability, we store and stream our content on the same servers as Netflix and Amazon. Our Roku channel is free to use, and anyone owning one of the more than 10 million Roku devices can watch our channel at no cost whatsoever. If you have a television show or are thinking about producing a show, you can be a part of AM/FM 24/7's Roku channel. Watch our great shows on your Roku device. It's free and more reliable than cable TV. Are you stuck with a timeshare? Did you attend the presentation and were seduced and enticed into buying that great vacation and investment? Now you're in the terrible position of trying to figure out a way to get out of that mess. You're not alone. For over 15 years, BuyYourTimeshare.com has been helping people like yourself get out of timeshare ownership. The fact is there is no resale market. Unscrupulous telemarketers call you and say they have buyers waiting, and the next thing that happens is you give them hundreds of dollars for an ad, and you'll never hear from them again. Another fact is that an identical timeshare to yours is being offered on eBay for $1, and no one is buying it. If you want out of your timeshare, I urge you to go to buyyourtimeshare.com or call them at 877-94-HELP-ME. That number again is 877-94-HELP-ME. Buyyourtimeshare.com. That's buyyourtimeshare.com. 877-94-HELP-ME.
Dish TV is better than cable TV. Here's why. Dish has the nation's lowest TV price, along with an award-winning DVR that can skip commercials, record 8 shows at once, and get access to thousands of movies at your fingertips. Cable simply can't even compare. So the smart choice is to cut the cable and get Dish. Plus, you get all these great TV features, free HD DVR upgrade, free installation, and free movie channels. Say goodbye to cable and get more with Dish TV. 877-290-7764, 877-290-7764. As an added bonus, you can switch to Dish now and receive a $50 Visa gift card. So call now and get Dish TV. Call 877-290-7764, 877-290-7764. That's 877-290-7764. Limited time offer, 24-month commitment and credit qualification required. Cancellation fee, monthly equipment fees, and other restrictions apply. Promotion can change at any time.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos radio show with George Landreth. I'm Sharron Engel, and we've got our first guest ready. George, I want to introduce Paul Driessen, who is a senior policy advisor for the Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow, CFACT, and an author of articles and books on energy and environmental and human rights issues. Paul, welcome to the Conservative Commandos radio show.
Thanks, Sharon. It's nice to be back with you and George.
Well, it's great to have you here, and we want to talk to you about an article that you wrote, Fear, Loathing, Intolerance, and Worse. The climate-fearing, capitalism-loathing left cannot abide questions or differing opinions. That seems to be the thing that's going on more and more these days. Talk to us a little bit about what you think is driving them.
Yeah, I think what's driving it is basically a fear and a loathing of anybody's contrarian opinions. Anybody that disagrees with them is a threat to them, a clear and present danger to their attempts to take control of our country, our energy, our living standards, our lives, and the whole public domain, really. I think at some level, many of them anyway, feel that they've been put on Earth because they're wiser than anybody else, and they're here to kind of govern everyone and make things right. People on our end of the political spectrum, in the middle of this political spectrum, may not agree with that, and therefore we need to be marginalized, censored, silenced. Our views need to be kept out of the public discussion.
Well,
I think
you use some pretty harsh similes, maybe, or metaphors here, or maybe comparisons. But you talk about the Nazis burning books, and you also talk about the word totalitarian. Now, in their mind, you would be on the ban you from whatever media list because you even dared to use those words. But talk about why you think these are Nazi totalitarian tactics.
I'm not calling them Nazis as such. I'm saying the Nazis engaged in book burning and then took some rather more extreme measures to silence their political and other opponents. And I'm saying the left these days, number one, is engaging in a lot of electronic book burning, as well as trying to prosecute people like me for denying the reality of man-made climate change, as they put it, or from my perspective, questioning, denying claims that human beings have taken over the role of the sun in governing climate, and that somehow we are now able to control Earth's climate, stabilize climate that has never been stable, and do it just by controlling fossil fuels and carbon dioxide emissions. So that is that climate change, fossil fuels debate is their key, their ticket to planetary governance. And if they lose on that, they're going to lose their efforts to be governing. And I also have labeled their basic game plan as fascism. And I'm going to read the definition I use for fascism that I've found online and elsewhere. And it's different from socialism or communism in that it doesn't own the factories and industries. But what it does, it's a political system in which authoritarian government, which they are definitely looking at, does not own the businesses and industries, but strictly regulates and controls their actions, their output, their rights, their activities. And at the same time, it constrains and suppresses citizens and their thought, speech, and access to information. So that is a fascist system, and that, I think, is what we're looking at here. They would bristle at that term because they claim they're the anti-fascists, but everything they do and how they want to run the economy is basically in sync with fascist points of view and economic theory. They may not go as far, I hope, as the Nazis and their ilk have done over the years, but they definitely have a totalitarian streak, and that's what we have to be fighting against.
Well, you mentioned one of our favorites, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, in your article. Talk to us a little bit about her.
Well, she has said she has no problem whatsoever with the massive government control and intervention that it would take to implement her Green New Deal. And she has no problem with our accepting trillions of dollars in new debt in order to implement her plans. She is also pretty unfriendly to contrarian points of view. She's very good talking to her own audience, her own band of followers on Twitter and Facebook and so forth, but she doesn't like to engage in discussions with the likes of me or you. So I think we're dealing with, again, with the same sorts of things, but her vision for this country to shut down what is 82% of all the energy we use, the fossil fuels, and 100% of the petrochemicals that are used in so many other applications, would have devastating consequences for our living standards, our lives, our jobs, and so forth. So I think we need to have this debate. What the folks on her end of the spectrum want is a discussion debate only on how fast we move to a fossil fuel-free economy, and how much government control that we give them, how quickly. They don't want to talk about whether or not we really do face a man-made climate change catastrophe, which I don't think we do. So I think that's the fundamental roadblock or conflict that we're having here, and we need the discussion, the debate over this whole issue of climate change reality first and foremost, before we even start to talk about wind, solar, biofuels, battery technologies, and things like that.
Well, and I think you raise a really good point in your article about the countless plastics that are made from 100% fossil fuels. She seems to be pretty good at using her computer to Facebook and tweet and do all that she needs to do to get her message out. But I look at my computer and it's mostly plastic. And I look at my cell phone and it's mostly plastic. I'm just wondering, maybe it wouldn't be such a bad idea. Maybe we would stifle some of this these free thought folks, where they can't seem to tolerate our attitude if we went back to just pen and ink and things like the Federalist Papers.
We wouldn't have a whole lot of that either, and in fact, Ocasio-Cortez would be cold, hungry, naked, and free of any social media if we didn't have fossil fuels. And it's not just the plastics, the copper, all the metals that go into your computer and any other thing in your life are possible only because of fossil fuels. The clothes that are made from cotton are possible only because of fossil fuels, because that's the only way we get to run our farms and gin the cotton and weave it and dye it and transport it. So nothing we have today in our lives is possible without fossil fuels. She just cannot seem to understand that very basic situation.
Well, she would usher in the apocalypse, wouldn't she? Because I read in my Bible there, it says, you say you are rich, but you're really poor and naked and wretched. And that seems to be where we'd be headed in an AOC America. But we need to go to a break right now. We're coming to you from the Conservative Commandos Radio Network studios and around the world on the internet with TalkStream Live, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, American Political Radio, Leading Edge Radio Network, and AM FM 24/7. And now you can watch us on the AUN TV network in Northern California. George Landreth, my co-host. I'm Sharron Angle, and we'll be right back with our guest, Paul Driessen, after this message.
I saw voter fraud with my own eyes. Now, people say, why didn't you report it to the authorities? Well, they were the ones doing it.
Elkins goes to vote for Merrick.
The integrity of one man, one vote doesn't apply at the Texas state legislature. There is no way to know if your representatives are voting for themselves.
Hartman, a Republican, reaches back to vote for Democrat Oliveira. Democrat Matt Reynolds votes for Republican England.
2 out of 3 voters nationwide believe that voter fraud is a serious problem in the U.S. today.
The process is rigged.
Both sides of the aisle are guilty.
Florida now has to tell the Department of Justice whether the state will comply with DOJ's demand to stop purging thousands of people from its voter rolls.
We have the sloppiest election system of any industrialized democracy.
Philadelphia flagged 50,000 duplicate registrations, so just think how many more slipped through.
It's almost impossible to detect.
How do you get caught? You only get caught if you confess.
Election corruption is deeply embedded in America. Quote, election fraud is a crime that usually pays, unquote, writes Tracy Campbell in his book, Deliver the Vote, A History of Election Fraud, an American political tradition from 1742 to 2004. In 1742, the first Prime Minister of Britain in the American colonies, Robert Walpole, was forced to resign.
We have a right not to have our vote canceled out by someone who shouldn't be voting, someone who's an illegal alien, someone who's a felon not eligible to vote, someone who doesn't exist. If they vote, they cancel your vote out as much as if you're prevented from voting.
If this is going to be fixed, it's going to have to be a citizen effort. It comes down to, it's the same old question, if not now, when? If not us, then who?
This is huge. This is about the democracy and the principles of the United States of America. People say, but why you? Why you? Why not? And if it starts with a fireman, if it starts with a sanitation worker, if it starts with a teacher or a nurse or a caretaker of the elderly, then so be it. It's got to start somewhere. But it's time we come together and fix this problem once and for all.
There is no serious person out there who would suggest somehow that you could even rig America's elections.
To say that it doesn't exist is an outright lie.
Serious allegations of voter fraud, the claims raising questions about the
Commerce Secretary Ron Brown and 32 others were on a military plane that crashed today in a violent storm. There are no known survivors at this time.
The U.S. Army was funded by the evil entity.
I saw voter fraud with my own eyes.
To say that it doesn't exist is an outright lie.
The process is rigged.
People die and fall for the right it's too time.
So it's incredibly important now that we draw a line and say, not on our watch.
Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos, the radio show and the television show. Thankfully, we are carried not only in the Conservative Commandos radio network all across this great nation, but also on the AUN TV network. And of course, we're always carried on Al Gore's amazing internet. We truly are everywhere. And well, I'm George Landreth, and I am here with Sharron Engel. We're your co-host today. This truly is the place to be. And we just want to remind you, if you want to hear a rebroadcast or see a rebroadcast, view one, you can go to our website, ccrsnetwork.com, ccrshow.com. It's all there. Now, we've been talking with Paul Driessen, and I should probably disclose, Paul's been a friend of mine for many years. We first met each other in the Sandbox I'm joking, not quite that early, but it's been a while. At any rate, so Paul, but he is a senior policy advisor at the Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow, CFACT, which, of course, is an organization that triggers people like AOC, because he brings fact and analysis and information to bear when she would prefer to have a fact-free conversation. And thanks to people like Paul, she can't do that. But anyhow, Paul, it's great to have you on the show. We're glad you stuck through the break. We really appreciate it. I wanted to ask you, just to start off as we talk about this, energy really matters, and it's fine to talk about energy in terms of if we just could get rid of energy, if we could just operate off of wind or solar or something like that. That all sounds great in theory, I suppose, but in practice, the modern world is what it is today because of fossil fuels. And I don't mean just that we can travel all around the globe in just a matter of hours. I mean things like we can sustain life. We have babies that are premature that used to die that can now be put in incubators. All of these things are advances quality of life improvements that were made possible by these technologies that people like AOC think are just unspeakable. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that, what it would mean to America, and then let's go to the third world and ask ourselves what it would mean to their development, their hopes of ever becoming a first world country with life expectancies and the sorts of things that we take for granted, quite frankly.
Yeah, that's an excellent introduction to something I've been writing about for a long time. My book, Eco-Imperialism, Green Power, Black Death, gets into that very heavily. And the reality is, we didn't start moving out of our very primitive life on the edge existence as human beings until around 1810, 1820, when we started using coal as the first fossil fuel. Life expectancies back then were in the early 40s. Even by 1900, they were only around 47 for Americans and a lot lower elsewhere. And if you look at the progress, our living standards, our health, and our longevity all began with fossil fuels. The improvements from 40 years, 47 years to the 78 years of age that we can expect in today's America began and are sustained with fossil fuels. And what you see in Africa and other poor developing countries or undeveloped countries is horrid living conditions, health, nutrition, horrid longevity. Kids still dying, about a third of them before they reach age 5 in these countries, and adults on average not living much past 40. So to tell these countries they should not have fossil fuels means that they have to live on whatever health and living standards, lights, refrigeration, and so forth are made possible by a few wind turbines and solar panels. And that means they're going to be condemned to living maybe a little bit better than they do now, but not much. So Ocasio-Cortez and the environmentalists, the Greenpeaces and Sierra Clubs of the world are basically telling them, well, we want to improve your living standards, but not very much, because if you become middle class, you'll take too many resources out of the earth, and that would hurt the planet even more and contribute more to climate change. So our hope is that you'll be content with slightly improved lives, but not much. And that, to me, is just totalitarian, eco-imperialistic, carbon colonialism, and it means that we're going to condemn millions of them year after year to premature death, children and parents and elderly people alike. And that, to me, is immoral and unethical. The very things that they rail about are what they are guilty of.
It is interesting that the left spends so much time projecting. They look in the mirror and they see their own ugliness, and then they lay that over top of everyone else and pretend that that's their problem. And the reality is, you and I never wake up in the morning asking ourselves how we can control and dominate other people's lives, how we can lock them into their current circumstance and not allow them to improve. In my perfect world, we'd all be millionaires. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, it'd be awesome if the minimum wage were we were all millionaires. I just want the marketplace to do it because I think that's the best way to do it. I don't think regulation will do it. But they on the one hand talk about they're for the little guy, and on so many different levels, it's clear they do not care about the little guy. They don't care at all.
No, they don't. And they don't like the little guy very much. I think a lot of their programs are racist. They're certainly lethal. They may not be imposing death on people here in the United States, despite their totalitarian approach to things, but they're imposing death on people all around the world. And I think your point about projection is absolutely true. We've been battling this for a long time, and yet they haven't budged an inch on any of their policies, no matter how often you confront them. But they are very uncomfortable with being labeled carbon colonialists, eco-imperialists, eco-manslaughterers. And they are.
We're running short on time. I've got one more question, and I was just going to ask you this question, which is, as we engage in this debate, more and more we're hearing that speech is action. It used to be that you could say whatever you want, but you couldn't do whatever you want. So now they're saying speech is action. So when you say these sorts of things, when I say these sorts of things, when Sharron says these sorts of things, we are taking action, and therefore government power should be able to regulate us. How serious a threat is that to a free society where we can all think and disclose and have conversations and discuss things and debate?
I think it's a clear and present danger to all the fundamental freedoms and rights that we've enjoyed and that have made American prosperity and innovation possible. We need to be able to get down there and have an open, robust debate. What they want is to be able to insult and infuriate anyone on our side and get away with it, threaten any of us with fines and imprisonment and get away with it. But they don't want us to be able to engage in even respectful debate if we use any kind of tough language, which they use on a regular basis. So the bottom line is we need to have these open-ended debates right now on all these fundamental policy issues before they get a chance to just ram things through by saying, well, we have 97% consensus on climate change.
Yeah, exactly. Paul, tell our listeners and our viewers how they can follow your work so that they can look you up and when, they don't have to wait for the periodic times when you're on the show, but they can always follow the things you're talking about.
There's three great places to go. One is cfact.org, cfact.org, townhall.com, go to the columnists, and What's Up With That, as well as many, What's Up With That, WATTS, upwiththat.com. Great climate website. My articles are carried on those sites as well as many others around the country and around the world.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much, Paul. It's been great to have this conversation with you. Just very enlightening, and I think it lets people know what's at risk. And it's an important discussion. But we are up against the break. We're up against the clock. It sometimes rules us like a cruel taskmaster, but that's how it is. But you are listening to Conservative Commandos. I'm George Landreth with Sharron Engel, and we, of course, are coming to you on the Conservative Commandos radio network, which is broadcast all across this great nation. And also, you can watch us now on anytime you want to see the Conservative Commandos, we are on the AUN TV network as well. And we are carried around the entire world, with the possible exception of a couple totalitarian regimes, on Al Gore's amazing internet.
Everybody wants cheap airfare, but where do you find it? You call low-cost airlines. Their prices are direct from the airlines, and they're so low you can't find these fares published anywhere. They specialize in cheap flights, discount hotel rooms, cheap car rental rates, and great package deals anywhere around the world. Wherever you want to go, they can help you get there cheaply and with a best price guarantee. If you want the lowest prices on your airline tickets or other travel services, call now. That's right, call. That's the only way to get these rates. Experts are standing by 24/7 to get you the cheapest airfare and hotel rates available. So don't wait. Call right now for the lowest travel prices anywhere and for great last-minute travel deals too.
Call 888-431-0562. That's 888-431-0562. 888-431-0562. 888-431-0562.
Thank you for staying with us. This is the Conservative Commandos radio show. I'm Rick Trader. And for rebroadcast, please check out our website, CCRShow.com. That's CCRShow.com. And you can find our radio show, our TV show, a lot of great articles, a lot of terrific information. I want to welcome back to the Conservative Commandos Maria Epinoza. She's a successful businesswoman, and she heads up a national initiative which she founded with her husband, the Remembrance Project. Maria has been a guest on radio and internet shows, including Lars Larson, Laura Ingraham, and many more. She's often featured in blogs across the country where immigration is a topic. Maria, welcome back to the Conservative Commandos. Great to have you with us once again.
Pleasure to be here with you, Rick. Thanks so much for being a voice out there, too.
Well, thank you for what you do. I mean, we're a team. We all are a team, no matter where we are, what we do, where we're at in the country. It takes a team. And my God, Maria, by what's going on, we are really up against the battle. And We have an article here by Daniel Horowitz, and it's "Cartels Are Kicking Our Butts in New Mexico. The state is left without checkpoints." And he starts out this article, Daniel does, by asking this question, and it's a legitimate question. What happens when our government takes down its interior checkpoints north of the border with Mexico? And as I'm reading this article, I'm shaking my head because we hear of what is going on our southern border, how people are flooding across it. But apparently, these interior checkpoints have been shut down. And in Ontario County in New Mexico, the whole county, the whole border, which borders with Texas, is being secured or try to secure with 3 deputies.
Right, that's not security, Rick.
No, it's
and
not.
That's no surprise. You know, the cartels own the entire southern border. The cartels are behind some of this organizing these foreign nationals in these caravans to come to our border, and they bring them here to our southern border and get them here illegally. They claim these false asylum claims, and they come with family units so that they're not deported, and we're bringing them into our interior. They have to wait, 2, 3, 5, even up to 6 years for a court hearing. Over 90% don't show up. They get on our government assistance, and guess what? They're here. So it's much tougher than people realize. And no matter if you do not live in a state that is a southern border with Mexico, your state is still immigration still affects your state. So every state is a border state, Rick.
Absolutely. And Daniel writes in his article, this sparsely populated but large county border in Texas, it's near El Paso, quote, and this is quoting Corey Griffin, who's the chairman of the Ontario County, New Mexico County Commission. He says we get so tied up and focused on asylum seekers or illegal immigrant suspects for coming across the border, but they're really not seeing the big picture, and that is boatloads of drugs crossing our unsecured border. But we don't hear about that, Maria. All we hear about is these poor people coming here for a better way of life or to escape terror in places like Honduras or El Salvador.
Well, nothing's changed in those other countries, Rick. You know, it's just the organization and the fact that the Democrats have basically told the world to come on, that they would not give President Donald Trump $1 to secure our nation. Mm-hmm. You know, they made that announcement. So in my opinion, they were telling the entire world to come on because they had fixed it to where there are huge loopholes. And frankly, the Republicans are guilty of this as well because they failed under the failed leadership of Paul Ryan back 2 years ago when President Trump first took office. We had the majority in the House and the Senate, and we had America First president. That's when everything should have been done. Laws should be enforced. They're playing around with drafting more bills, more laws, and why create more laws when you are not even securing and enforcing the current laws?
Right. Well, Maria, you can get me started when you start talking about the Democrats and the Republicans. You know, we were told 10 years ago, you know, when we wanted to get rid of Obamacare, please give us the House. We'll do something about Obamacare. We got them the House. They didn't do anything about it. They says, well, we need the Senate. Well, we got them the Senate, and they still didn't do anything. They says, well, we need a president to sign these bills. And I'm using Obamacare as an example, but we could also say the same thing about illegal immigration. Well, we got them a Republican in the White House, and then they refused to work with the man. They refused to work with the man. So the president says, I want money to secure the border. And as the Republicans in Congress, there are some of them who want to work with the president. But there are too many who don't, who want to fight him, who almost fall in line with the Democrats, who almost fall in line with the Chamber of Congress, who want these illegals coming here to produce for the cheap labor.
True, exactly. You know, what we focus on is the most egregious of all of illegal immigration, and that is the loss of life. You know, so if Nancy Pelosi and Schumer think that this is a manufactured crisis, they know better. They refuse to meet with us. You know, they shut out Angel Moms. They're on the Hill. They refuse to meet with them. They were on the other side of the wall with locked doors and calling Capitol Police. We had our surrogate there on the Hill go in and try to meet with Senator Rand Paul. They locked the door, then they called Capitol Police. So this is just asking for a discussion, one-on-one, asking to be strong on laws, follow the Constitution. They can't even do that.
These checkpoints, Maria, are very important. And again, quoting him, it says in February, before closing the checkpoints, they seized $3,500 worth of drugs, including meth, heroin, and marijuana. In March, we seized $23,000, and in April, we seized $61,000. For that county, it's a lot. Well, this is what this small force of three are doing. I can't imagine what is coming across the border. And then we hear calls from the left that talks about the opioid epidemic, which I'm not going to diminish as a problem. They talk about opioids as a problem, but these other drugs, meth, cocaine, heroin, that you could go on and on. I mean, those drugs, in my opinion, are as deadly or more deadly than the opioids. And
we're going to see crime and the drug problem exponentially just burst in just a short amount of time here, because we don't know who is here. You know, we don't know what type of criminals. Obviously, anyone who crosses our border without permission, their character is certainly, at best, questionable. So we're going to see an explosion of crime. Take a look in Kentucky. There were 3 Hispanic males. I don't know if they were illegal aliens, but they were walking around without a shirt, with the machete, and they attacked children playing basketball in the park. They stabbed one 9-year-old boy in the back, 3-inch deep and a 2-inch wide incision. And they walked off. You can see the part of the video and photos. They walked off as if nothing and unprovoked. And this is what we have. We don't know who's here, Rick, and that's very, very dangerous. And we know that these dangerous sanctuary city policies, they harbor criminal illegal aliens, and they go on to kill innocent Americans. But then they're finally deported or adjudicated, then deported. But after they've done their terrible deeds, and these are permanent separations of our families, and yet our so-called public servants don't have the heart or the will to place American safety first.
Maria, I'll be honest with you. I did not hear about that. I did not hear about that crime. And that's not surprising, because crimes happen every day committed by illegals that seem to be hush-hush. And that, you know, you may even hear about the crime, but the description of the perpetrator is so vague. And then when you do find out about the perpetrator, well, they tried to hide the fact. And when I say they, I'm talking about the liberal media, which is in lockstep with the left, with the Democrats. And come to find out, wow, this person should have never been in this country to begin with. All right. Maria Epinoza, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Like I said, I'm serious about this. We have at least a once monthly date. Maria, the Remembrance Project, again, please tell our audience how they connect with you and find out the work that you do.
Our website is theremembranceproject.org. We're on Facebook at Stolen Lives and the Remembrance Project, and Stolen Lives Quilt and the Remembrance Project. Our Twitter handle is at Stolen Lives QLT, stands for quilt. You can also sign up for our emails on our website. And thank you so much, Rick, for being a voice for the voiceless as well. God bless you.
And I thank you for what you do. Maria Epinoza, thank you so much for joining us. Take care and God bless.
Thank you.
And this
Bye-bye,
is
Rick.
the Conservative Commandos radio show. I'm Rick Trader. But for right now, we are out of time. We got to run. We got to go. Take care. God bless. We'll see you tomorrow on TV and on radio.